and welcome to Western Region Economic Development's first virtual seminar of 2025. My name is Sarah Johnson. I am the past president of Western Region Economic Development. RED exists to facilitate and promote a vibrant and diversified economy and advocate for a sustainable growth and development for Western North Dakota. One of the things we offer every year are these virtual seminars to educate and inform our members and the public on topics of particular interest in our region. Our presentation today is going to be a good one. It's a very sought after topic and one that holds very true value to our region. 2025 Oil and Gas Economic Outlook. This virtual seminar today is proudly sponsored by the Williston Basin chapter of American Petroleum Institute, or Williston API, as we affectionately call it around here. We welcome today Nathan Anderson, the newest director of the North Dakota Department of Natural Resources Oil and Gas Division. He has taken over the reins from Lynn Helms, who retired this past year. He joined the team at the North Dakota Department of Natural Resources in September of 2024. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm most certainly happy to be back in North Dakota. I'll share one quick story. The other day I was in church, and it was probably 20 below zero here in Bismarck, and everybody was cold. Everybody had their winter jackets, and the pastor comes up on stage, and the first thing he says is, "Isn't it so great that we don't have to worry about mosquitoes for the next couple months?" And I thought that was just a fantastic perspective from him for this time of the year. But here in Bismarck, at least, we have a big warm up happening right now. Roughly 40-degree swing in the last 2 days, so it's going to be nice to get some warmer weather. Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. Look forward to working with you all over time and meeting you all over time. I am new to the DMR, and working for state government is something new for me as well. I thought it would be nice to take a couple moments just to share a few things about myself. As mentioned, Lynn's was in this role for greater than 26 years, and was a great leader and had an incredible career here at the DMR. It's new to me, and I need to acknowledge that this is a time of transition, not only for me, but for the team here at the DMR as well. And that, between Lynn and I, we both follow the same mission statement at the DMR, but, we are different people and different leaders. So there may be ideas that I have that Lynn didn't share, and vice versa. But I have been in a regular contact with Lynn through the transition. He's been gracious enough to stay on with the DMR on an advisory basis, or a contract advisory basis. So most of the time when he's not doing retired things, I'm able to get a hold of him and bounce ideas and questions off of him. So it's been good. I started with the DMR on September 16th, and I've really taken, so that's just over 4 months, really taken these first few months to integrate myself with the people, the team, the processes, the people, both internal and external. I think it's important that for me that I really connected with the team here. So I've taken that opportunity to try to connect in a meaningful, personal way with all 108-ish employees that we have here at the DMR, and I'm proud to say that I've been able to accomplish that. I think I'm within 1 or 2 employees that I haven't met personally, so that's been a big positive. Won't go through too much of the personal background, as some of that was read, but born and raised in Minot. A little bit about my family. My father comes from a farming community just outside of Carpio, North Dakota, and my mother comes from a family of 7, and they were mostly involved in the railroad and moved around to different railroad depots across kind of northwest North Dakota, but ultimately kind of that Carrington area, and then Carpio, where my mother and father met. My father was in wildlife conservation. My mother was a small business owner. And I have a kind of deep roots in the education background as well. And, as mentioned, I graduated from North Dakota State University. Following graduation, I went to work in the oil and gas industry, and that's where I have been for the last 25 years. I worked for 3 companies, but really 2, because PDC Energy was acquired by Chevron. Most recently, I worked as a senior asset director for PDC Energy When it flipped over to Chevron, I was a senior advisor for Chevron, integrating the people and the assets of the West Texas assets that I had managed from mid 2016 until we were acquired in mid 2023. And I did that for about 8 months, and had the opportunity to move around with them, but ultimately decided that it was best that I come back home and bring my family here. And I'm excited to raise my kids here. That's my family on the picture there. My wife, Brandy, and then I have 3 kids. My daughter is 9, and then my middle child is 12, and my oldest is 14, just turned 14. And so excited to have them here and raising kids in North Dakota. It's I always cherished growing up here in the state, and look forward to that same thing for my children. Also mentioned I work multiple assets in North Dakota, Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, Ohio, Michigan, Texas, and probably a couple others, New Mexico a little bit. But I think this is important because there's a broad range of experiences that I have the ability to draw from those experiences to hopefully help the state of North Dakota. My passion is building and leading great teams. Coming into this role, there's a team in place, and a great team in place, and I look forward to continuing to try to enhance that. Following the acquisition of my last company, I was looking for, kind of relevancy in my next career, and again, leading great teams was at the top of the list, and that's what I think I've found here at the DMR. I'm people oriented, and I like data driven decisions and people that come with solutions. So that's a little bit about me. Moving on, these are my core beliefs in my leadership statement. I'll get to your guys' mission and vision statement here on the next slide or two, but my core beliefs, I'm pro-business. I interviewed that way when I interviewed for the job in front of the Industrial Commission. I like building strong relationships, both internal here at the DMR, but externally as well. And I appreciate you all having me here today. Team-oriented, I believe in a strong middle class. I think it's the strongest indication of a good economy in the United States. I believe in good paying jobs, and most certainly jobs in the energy industry do provide that for North Dakotans. I believe in a balanced approach to oil and gas development. So it's not all industry. I believe there's positives positive strides we can make from all aspects, and not just oil and gas production all the time. I believe in U.S. manufacturing, and a strong faith is critical to who I am. About 15 years ago, I created my leadership and teaming statement. It really hasn't changed much, and I won't go through every bit of it, but I'll read a couple points that I think are important. And I think it's maybe the second or third line, where we hire great people, we train effectively, we build these solid relationships, receiving buy-in from the people, empowering your teammates to do what you ask them to do and what you hire them to do, and then creating accountability to the goal of the team, and a team that's built on trust. And I think that's incredibly important. And then the second to last line for me is, being authentic and genuine, and treating employees fairly, both personally and financially. And that's just showing up as who I am every day, and not somebody that others might want me to be. So it's my commitment to my team is to lead that way, and so far so good. I also believe in an environment where innovation is critical, and I think being empowered to ask the question of why. Respectfully, why do we do it this way? Why have we done it this way in the past? Is there a better way to do it? Those are the questions that need to be answered to help progress occur. So that's a little bit about that. This statement outlines the mission statement of the oil and gas division specifically. And, reading the underlined portion, the mission is to encourage and promote the development, production, and utilization of oil and gas in the state in such a manner as will prevent waste, maximize economic recovery, and protect the correlative rights of all owners. Now, I've been asked probably 3 times already in 4 months how I can be a regulator and a promoter. And I can assure you that Mark Bohr and the team at the Oil and Gas Division is best in class at regulation. I am new to regulation, or new in coming into regulation. And so I'm getting myself up to speed, and I'm on a steep learning curve. But right in there, it also says promote the development of the resources. And I think having that balance of being able to have a great team like Mark's team that's best in class at regulation and continue to promote the resource is incredibly important. And that's the mission statement that the Industrial Commission has adopted for the department. And my interests are squarely aligned with the people of the state of North Dakota and the resource that North Dakota has to offer. So, generally, again, I believe in a balanced, responsible energy development approach. So, okay, I didn't know anything about Western Region Economic Development, so I spoke to Lynn and I asked a few questions to him, but I also went online. And the first thing that jumped out at me was your guys' mission and vision statement. These are those. And the red arrows with the words that I've added are the first words that came to mind when I was reading those statements. And when I look at your guys' vision statement, be the leader for the members in creating sustainable growth or lasting growth, and development in the region. You have a region that you're focused on, which is incredibly important. Then the mission statement of West Region Economic Development exists to facilitate or collaborate is what came to mind for me, and promote or lead the way with a vibrant and diversified. Diversified was a great word to me. That's economic health. It's not just one industry. There's a multitude of industries that help provide well-being to the people of the state. Meaningful or sustainable economy through collaboration and outreach. So togetherness and education. But did a little bit of homework, and really liked your guys' mission vision statement, and thought that I'd share the first words that came to mind when I saw the mission and vision statement. So today I'll cover these five main categories. We'll get started with statistics and then go on to Bakken development, a little bit about non-Bakken development, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or otherwise known as the IIJA for short, and then some headwinds that both Lynn saw 2 years ago and what I'm seeing today. First off is the ever important oil and gas production. Taking a closer look at this goes through oil, gas, and flaring for the last 4 years since 2021. The green is your oil production in the state of North Dakota, and you can see that 2023 and 2024 are really, really close, almost identical. This is a daily average oil output in the state, just under 2 million barrels a day. I do expect that to be steady for 2025. There is some headwinds that we'll speak to near the end that could impact that. Gas production is in red. You can see that that's gone up over the last couple of years. And I have another slide that speaks to that here in a little while. The black line right in the middle is your gas capture, and the state remains strong in that at right around 95%. This data is 10 months of actual plus 2 months of forecast. So I am forecasting 2024 numbers. So, in short, what I would expect to see for 2025 is oil production steady between that 1.1 to 1.2 million barrels. We may creep up above that. We did in the month of November at 1.221 million barrels for the month of November on average. I expect that to remain steady for 2025. I think it's important to note that 97% of the production in North Dakota comes from the Bakken Three Forks, and it encompasses 89% of the wells. So it's something to be mindful of with as a group like yours that looks for economic health and economic growth. What's the next formation after the Bakken, or are there other techniques that we need to look into to continue to help explore and exploit the Bakken or other intervals within the Williston Basin? All right, this is North Dakota oil production and price. You've seen this in the past, I would imagine. I think Lynn had it in his presentation a couple years ago. I want to point out a few items. For those of you that have been around a long time, I was around in during the 1980s oil boom, but I don't remember it. You can see the green line on the bottom, which is your oil production, barrels of oil per day in North Dakota. And that was a pretty incredible time in the state where there was a lot of activity, lots going on with oil production. There was a lot going on worldwide, but you can see the impact that oil boom had on production. It went from just probably under 100,000 barrels a day to maybe 180,000 barrels a day, somewhere in that range. But you fast forward 20 years and shale development begins, and it did begin in North Dakota right around that time frame that I have the arrow there, 2003, 4, 5, in that time frame. And then you really look at the increase in production from what was a pretty flat, steady production in the state to this incredible increase that North Dakota has seen from 2005 to current. Then you go fast forward again to 2020, and you have this COVID demand destruction. And when I say that, it was we were at 100 million barrels of oil produced and utilized each day in the world, and almost overnight that number goes down to 70 million barrels, and thus oil production in North Dakota had a similar reaction. But really, since 2021, when we started to come back from that, oil production in the state has been pretty consistent, right around that 1.2 million barrel per day number. I'll also point out that in the lower right-hand corner, the U.S. has really gained energy independence across the globe. And it's now a net exporter instead of a net importer. So it's really a strong economic position that the United States is in, because of this. And, the United States is the largest producer of oil in the world. I think the most recent numbers from the EIA suggest that we're right at 13.5 million barrels of oil produced per day. All right, moving on. This graph shows activity levels and oil price. Spuds are in blue, wells completed are in green. Then the North Dakota sweet oil price is in the dotted black line. Two main time frames that I'd like to speak to as it relates to this is that time frame from 2016 through 2020, where the price of oil goes up and down and activity goes up and down. And then in 2020, COVID happens, and all of a sudden, activity and price are no longer connected. They're very disconnected. And really, what happened here was that COVID was hard. Companies that ran into that with high debt ratios ended up going through some very hard times, if not bankruptcy. And so the strongest companies survived that time. And what came out of it was this expectation of shareholder returns in 2020, and that still holds true today. So, no longer was production growth going to be a factor. It was really going to be about profitability of oil production, and it's really helped production stabilize and gain investor confidence across those companies that are operating. So yeah, I thought that was a real interesting thing to see. This was also a graph that Lynn showed in the past, but what jumped out to me was that disconnect that occurred right at COVID relating to that. Some statistics. It's busy, but I wanted to direct you to some numbers here. Those that are outlined kind of in that yellow box are the two most recent years, 2023 and 2024. But the 2022 to 2023 duck count is important. Coming off COVID, there was a lot of ducks in the system and a lot of completions occurred. So the duck count was drawn down. Inactive wells, 1886 to 1490 from 2022 to 2023. A lot of the IIJA dollars were utilized in those years. So the inactive well count went down. And as you can see, the rig count was relatively flat. Coming off COVID in 2021, ramped up to right around 40 rigs, and it's kind of there today. Actually, today we're at 34 rigs, and I'll speak to the drop in rigs here in just a little bit as well. Frac crews have been pretty neutral. A little bit of a lower frac crew count in 2024. It doesn't doesn't really concern me too much, because I do know, based on some preliminary numbers, that the team here at the DMR is working on, that the amount of completed lateral footage is actually increasing. So what's really happening there is that frac crews are being more efficient with what they have. So we're completing just as much rock, if not more rock, with less crews. So that's really what's going on there. Annual completions down just a little bit, and then total producing wells continues to rise, which is expected. But on my notes on the right, a slight decrease in the frac crews we spoke about. There's a significant trend towards longer and longer laterals. That impacts the frac crews and the rigs as well. Been a slight decrease in the rig count. Mergers have a pretty large impact on rig count, or can, depending upon what basins the companies that purchase operators in North Dakota are working in. For example, there's large multinational companies that have came into the basin. Conoco recently, acquired Marathon. You have Cord that's put together a group of companies that were here. You have Chevron that's in the process of acquiring Hess. And those are really large multinational companies, and they have many assets that they can spend their money in across not just the lower 48 in the United States, maybe even Alaska, but across the globe. So, and a lot of times we'd think they would take a balanced approach to that, but they're still working for shareholder increases. So, a company like Chevron might say, well, we've merged with Hess, and I don't know this for certain, but Conoco and Marathon maybe. They have shareholders have expectations of capital efficiency gains. And in order to do that, typically they would lower rig count in certain basins and keep rig counts going in other basins. And the one basin that comes to mind that North Dakota ultimately has to compete with is for dollars and rigs is the Permian Basin. And so that's one way that mergers tend to impact rig count, is through those capital efficiencies. What I expect in 2025, again, production, I expect to stay between the 1.1 to 1.2 million barrels. I expect rig count to be steady, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was a slight decrease in the rig count because of those mergers and capital efficiency gains. And I expect frac crews to remain somewhat consistent as well. All right, a little bit on oil pricing. This is an interesting time to be trying to predict oil and gas pricing. You have a new administration stepping into office. There's mergers in the world. There's sanctions going on. There's talk of tariffs. There's wars happening. There's uncertainty, and all of that equals oil and gas price volatility. I would expect that oil and gas price will stay steady for the short term. But I will say that I can't predict much about long term until we see Trump and this administration in office for a few months. There's a lot of levers that this administration has right now to keep production balanced. The world utilizes my fulcrum there, and my crude artwork of a fulcrum with the world uses about 102 million barrels a day, and there's roughly 102 million barrels a day in supply. So one of the ideas is, if this administration comes in and puts sanctions on Iran and Venezuela, where does the increase in production happen? Most certainly, I think it would, like the most likely place that it would come from in order to keep that balanced is Saudi Arabia. But there's also other things going on. You have the Paris Climate Accord. I don't expect the Trump administration to stay involved in that. There's been an NGL permit pause in trying to get gas out of the United States. I would expect that to be lifted. There's a war in Israel. I believe that's coming to an end with the new administration. And then you have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that's been drawn down during the Biden administration. So they really have the ability to increase output within the United States to put barrels back into the SPR. The chart in the upper right speaks to pricing. I think pricing today, kind of lower right hand corner. I also gave this presentation to the legislature 2 weeks ago. So, pricing today is right around $76 a barrel. You can see where it's been in 2024 at $77, and then you can see some of the ranges. But really a pretty tight range between $69 and $85 a barrel. We're sitting right in the middle of that at 76 right now. In the red, right below that, you have the discount, $6.77 for the year. So the discount's gone up just a little bit. I'm told that's mostly attributable to the original 7-year terms on the DAPL coming off, and then companies kind of reshuffling their deck on where they're moving their oil. Other factors to consider: there's slowing economies in China, Germany, France. It's likely that we're going to have a new prime minister in Canada, and where would that prime minister be from, and what would those values be? I mentioned Saudi Arabia is likely to balance production if sanctions occur. I would expect this administration to streamline regulation and incentivize manufacturing across the United States, which should be bullish on investment. So that's a little bit about where I think pricing is going to go. I would predict that for the short term it'll be steady, but I think it could be bearish. Between kind of that mid range, the 6 to 18 months, just because of the amount of supply that's in the system. All right, moving on to Bakken development. Lynn had a similar inventory slide to this a couple of years ago. You all may have seen that. This is specific to Bakken and Three Forks inventory. This is most certainly something that I'm mindful of and will be going forward. We'll take note of the core or tier 1 acreage in green. This is really the best of the best rock in the Williston Basin for the Bakken Three Forks formations. The team has reworked these numbers from a couple years ago, and the estimate is that it's 85 to 90% developed. There's still roughly 2,600 wells of inventory in there. And if there were 22 rigs running for 5 years, that would be the expected life of that core area. And currently there's 15 rigs in that core. So most certainly longer than a 5-year inventory in the core still. Tier 2 acreage, 50% developed. This rock is pretty good rock. Typically not as strong economically, but still currently economic at today's prices. The team estimates there's 11,000 wells in there. And if there were 16 rigs in there for 5 years, you'd drill 1,920 wells with a remaining inventory of a little over 9,000 wells remaining. So plenty of inventory there. I do think that the yellow and the red tiers are opportunities for these longer laterals to continue to make them more and more economic. And we're seeing a lot of that as well in the permitting. Your tier 3, these are fringe wells in red. Economic but sporadic, not consistent across all of that area yet. There's challenges that still need time to mature. There's also challenges like gas takeaway in those areas, pipelines, gas. There might be gas there. We might have higher flaring percentages in those areas just because there's less gas infrastructure in the area. Roughly 10,000 wells in that tier. If we had a couple rigs in there, which is what we have right now, over the course of 5 years, you'd drill 240 wells, and the remaining inventory would be, right at 9,700 wells. So still plenty of Williston Basin inventory in the Bakken Three Forks, for a total of 23,000, a little over 23,000 wells. And EOR, with the idea that EOR eventually will be expected to extend that inventory into the future. For this, we're assuming 15 days per well, and that one rig can drill 24 wells a year. And they're 2-mile equivalent laterals. And like I mentioned, the team here is working on statistics related to 3 and 4 mile laterals, which is what we're seeing currently. Oop, 2 slides. All right. The Geologic Survey recently put out a press release on the second bench of the Three Forks formation, or that middle layer right below the Bakken, and on December 30th, actually. And really, this was a joint effort by the survey, ultimately showing up 2 600 new locations that you can see in the kind of my red circle on the bottom. The study area is on the map on the left. The highest oil cut area is where the study area was focused on. There was 70 wells in that study area that the team combed through data on over the last couple of years. In the upper right-hand corner, that chart shows EURs, but specifically the star above the spacing units. These are 5 different spacing units. Spacing unit A, B, C are the 3 that I'll point your attention to, and they show 1.4 million barrels of oil additional recovery in those spacing units when the second bench of the Three Forks is developed. And I think what I've noticed is consistency in the second bench isn't always there yet, but the resource is. So there's still plenty of oil in place in this bench, especially in that core area with the highest oil cut. Another project that just takes time to mature. Like I mentioned, coming off COVID, companies went to their highest rate of return projects, and they really focused on shareholder returns. And when they do that, they high grade their drilling locations to the best rate of return projects. And I truly believe that someday the middle bench of the Three Forks will be another important play here in North Dakota. I think this type of analysis, along with operators testing the limits, ultimately help drive investor growth in the basin. So, all right, this looks like my title got cut off, but it's Bakken lateral length development trends, and this really shows that development trend of 3 to 4 mile laterals. On the left is a spacing unit northwest of Tioga, or spacing units northwest of Tioga, originally drilled on 2 mile lateral spacing. I don't know, can anybody see my cursor here? Right in the middle?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let's look at this number 1 here. This is an original, kind of the second rectangle from the right. This unit was originally drilled on a 2 mile spacing unit, in which case this operator, Kraken Operating, came in and overlaid a 3 mile spacing unit over that, and now is developing this whole field on 3 mile laterals. And these are becoming more and more common, specifically 3 mile laterals. Moving over to the 4 mile laterals, we've had roughly a dozen of these permitted in the state, and recently there was an operator that successfully completed or hydraulically fractured the first 4 mile lateral in North Dakota, which is a big step in the right direction, especially for the tier 2 and tier 3 acreage that I spoke about 2 slides ago. But this is an example north of Halliday. So along Lake Sakakawea, the river kind of comes into the main lake at this point. But you can see some of this acreage over on the right that otherwise may not be developed from other areas is able to be developed now with the onset of these 4 mile wells. This is actually a one big spacing unit, 6 or 8 section spacing unit. But this is common, starting to be common, where 4 mile spacing units are overlaid on top of 2 mile spacing units. So, again, another positive, innovation technology that's moving forward here in the state, along with many areas of the United States that are also doing this. So let me check my notes here. So yeah, really improved economics for most operators. Moving on to enhanced oil recovery, and this really shows the cases that have been or the pilot projects that have been going on in the state. I've outlined 4 different pilot projects, and then the method for which these pilot projects are ongoing. So this particular one was a Liberty case east of Tioga, and they were testing EOR utilizing fresh water as a surfactant, or kind of like dish soap, but probably a little more chemistry to it than just dish soap. And that was done September 2021 through November 2023. there's a Hess case. This one is wrapped up. The one on the far left is wrapped up from what I understand. The other three tests are still ongoing. You can see the date of first injection on this particular EOR test was about a year ago. And that one's still going on. This one was about 2 years or a year and a half ago. EOR project utilizing cyclic injection and natural gas and flowback. So flowback fluids and field gas are being used for EOR. And then on the far right, this one started mid last year, utilizing field gas and a surfactant laden water. So it's good. It's great that the industry is out there testing these projects. All of these are EOR huff and puff type technology tests, where they take these mediums, these fluid mediums, they pump them into the well, they shut the well in, they allow that fluid to soak, or allow oil and gas to move towards the wellbore, and then they produce, and then they repeatedly do that over and over again, and it's called huff and puff technology. So all important tests that are being done in the state. The largest challenge is that this is a shale rock, and shale rock doesn't have very good permeability, and it doesn't have very good porosity. EOR projects or water floods or CO2 floods in the past that have been really successful have been in more your conventional sandstone, limestone type reservoirs, and this is a different beast. The shale rock, and coming up with the technology to enhance the oil recovery of the shale rock is going to be something that occurs over the next probably decade. And so, but it's exciting that operators are doing this. All right, so Kelly Armstrong spoke to this in his state of the state when he first took office, and I'd like to walk through this just a little bit, but it really outlines the need for additional gas infrastructure in the state. This slide is a slide that Justin Kringstead at the North Dakota Pipeline Authority put together. The red line is your gas production, and your green line is your oil production, and we're right here, right around this time frame, right in the middle of the slide. And then your orange line is your gas to oil ratio line. And really what this is showing is that as we grow production from 1.2 million barrels up to right about 1.3 million barrels, and if that gas to oil ratio continues this same trend, we would be pipeline limited right around that 1.3 million barrel mark here in the state. And that production at that point would likely start to oil production at that point could start to decrease, or lost opportunity. And so we're not there yet. We're at 1.2 million barrels. There's a open season on a gas pipeline that WBI has going on right now. I believe that closes in the coming few weeks. We'll then get a sneak peek at what kind of interest operators in the state have about taking gas from the Williston Basin and moving it all the way east to the Red River Valley. But what I told the legislature is that we really need to seek out innovative ways to incentivize gas utilization takeaway projects. Oil may never go to 1.3 million barrels, but I wouldn't bank on a may. I would be proactive in trying to help incentivize utilization and takeaway projects in the state. So, all right, moving on to non-Bakken development. So I think I mentioned it, 97% of the production in the state is from the Bakken. So there is quite a few wells producing significantly lower volumes. The map on the left shows wells in the western part of the state. Everything in gray is a Bakken Three Forks well. And then you can see all the other colors, the triangles, the squares, the circles, the diamond shapes. Those are all other formations that have been explored or developed over the last several years. In the upper left, and then the location of them heavily up in Renville, Bottineau County, and then some Red River plays down in Bowman, Slope County, and Golden Valley. What you'll notice in the graph in the upper right is the number of wells that have been spudded in non-Bakken formations. In 2013-14, you had a spearfish play up in Botno County that was busy. Again, about 100 spuds, 120 spuds those years. And what you see 2015 all the way through the current is just under 20. So not a lot of activity. And those wells that are being spud most recently are Madison Group wells. There's some recompletions going on. I'll speak to a company named Cobra, and just the main target right now is your Madison formation with non-Bakken activity. These are a couple of those tests. Horizontal wells, southwestern North Dakota and north central North Dakota. Here in the far left, Billings County example, Ragnar Exploration drilled 5 horizontal Madison wells in 22 and 23. And those wells are all now on production. In the middle is an example in Stark County of 5-star operating. They in 2023 they drilled a multilateral Madison well. 3 wells were spud in 2024. And then up in on the far right, up in Botno County, Empire, a company named Empire, ran a rig and drilled roughly 14 wells, and they're in various stages of production and confidential status. So there is some activity, non-Bakken activity, but by and large, the focus is on the Bakken. Moving on to the IIJA, or the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act that I spoke about. This one is interesting, especially with some of the recent developments with former Governor Burgum taking office as the Secretary of the Interior. But IIJA was an initial grant, $25 million grant. This one's at the finish line. Our team has just a couple $100,000 more to spend on this and finish. So we've utilized the full funds of the IIJA grant. We reclaimed roughly 111 locations and plugged 73 wells, Island Orphan wells with those dollars. We've received a second extension through September this year to use the remaining funds. And again, North Dakota service companies and contractors plugged 73 wells and 114 sites. The next grant is the formula grant on the bottom. And, phase 1, we have been awarded that $25 million. But I will say that there's challenges with the team here at the North Dakota Oil and Gas Division are working with the IOGCC, or the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission on this, which is a lot of it's oil and gas regulators throughout the United States. And there's some challenges with this. Things like the Historical Preservation Act would have significant requirements on the Department of Mineral Resources in for example, locating all indigenous tribes and notifying them that we plan to go plug a well ever. As you can imagine, trying to find indigenous tribes that don't exist anymore would be problematic. And then there's Endangered Species Act regulations that would be in place here. So, like I said, there's IOGCC member states that are choosing not to participate unless those requirements are reduced. And the irony of this is that these sites are island orphan sites. They're already disturbed sites, and acting in the true spirit of what reclamation dollars would be utilized for. It would be, not spending time and money and effort on things that really aren't going to have an impact. The real impact would be taking these dollars and utilizing those to reclaim island orphan sites that have already been disturbed. On the DMR website, there's a page that provides information on the status of each of these grants and subsequent activity. I just kind of threw that out there if anybody ever wants to take a look at that. Moving on to some headwinds. This is a slide that Lynn presented 2 years ago, and his headwinds that he was recognizing at the time were workforce, Wall Street, state, and then federal regulation. And then I'll show you mine here in a minute, but I think it's important to note that 2 years ago, here in the lower right, he recognized investor pressure to return cash to shareholders through dividends and buybacks instead of badly needed supply, which is production growth. That was the words that I used, was production growth. But same thing started 2 years ago, and it still holds true today. Looking at what I believe the headwinds are, you have, let's just start on the left with federal, political, and legal. You have the Trump administration taking office. You have two new secretaries, Chris Wright. Those of you that know him, I know Chris relatively well. He's one of the most incredible energy minds that I've seen anywhere. And when I say energy, he looks at all forms of energy, not just oil and gas production. So really, really well educated, well spoken, and should be great for energy policy across the United States. And then you have former Governor Burgum. You have a Secretary of Interior here that really understands the challenges that go on with federal lands and how they impact private mineral interests and private lands in the state of North Dakota and all across the West. And I really think that'll be a positive. Both appear to be pro-energy, and potential for leasing federal lands could be expedited potentially under former Governor Burgum's leadership. Moving on to geopolitical, I mentioned sanctions and tariffs. There's a lot going on about this. The other day, I was asked a question about tariffs on Canada, and I thought that was interesting. Canada's always been a friend of the United States, so we'll see what happens there. But most certainly of Iran, and Venezuela, that I would think, saying I don't believe President Trump's going to try to fund an Israeli war through Iran. So if that doesn't end soon, I would assume something could go into place there. Litigation, there's been, Lynn mentioned it on the prior slide 2 years ago, but he had a bunch of federal litigation going on, and a lot of those same litigation is still happening today. As mentioned, I won't go into each one of them prescriptively because I've only been in my position 4 months, and a couple of them I know quite a bit about, and the others I'm still catching up on. But the other side will litigate back if those are pulled back. So we'll see what happens with that. Moving on to the right, more North Dakota specific. When I think about this, Bakken inventory replenishment, we spoke about the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 acreage. That's something that I'm mindful of, and I'm very that's front of mind for me, is how do we continue as a state to work on the resource and continue to have an inventory that these companies have available for them to go out and drill. So working on that, or thinking about that a lot. Mergers, I brought this up earlier about companies, merging and having to show capital efficiencies. And, the easiest way for me to explain that is, one company gets together with another company, and then you have two companies, but really you have two companies in production. They really want 1.75 companies in their spend rate. So that's the capital efficiency that needs to be realized, or what they promised to their investors. And there's a lot of North Dakota companies who've merged lately. There's the Cord Group there at the top. Marathon became Conoco, WPX became Devon, Grayson Mill became Devon, and Chevron is in the process of attempting to acquire Hess. Also, earlier I mentioned these are large multinational companies, and they have many assets to spend their money on. And so when I think through maybe one of the largest challenges that North Dakota has to continue to think through and try to solve, I think of how to make North Dakota oil and gas, or the Williston Basin, compete with the Permian. For example, what type of things need to be done in the state, or what can be done in the state to help North Dakota oil and gas production compete with those large basins within the U.S. And near-term impacts. We spoke a little bit about the near-term impacts of mergers. Typically, there's a reduction in rig count, and I've seen that in the month of January. If you've taken a look at the latest director's cut data, we had a couple rigs drop from late 2024 to January thus far, and that's exactly what the drop is a drop in rig count for capital efficiencies. I moved to North Dakota, and one of the things that was surprising to me was all the talk around carbon capture for future use in EOR projects, and there's a lot going on with this. There's getting CO2 a little bit closer to the oil field, I think, is important, and it seems the balls seem to be rolling in that direction. We spoke a little bit about shareholder returns post-COVID, and that production growth was no longer the main driver, and that companies are growing production, but they're doing it through mergers and not necessarily through increases in activity and through the drill bit. And so, what does all this mean for investment in North Dakota? And it's competition for capital. And like I mentioned, these larger multinational companies moving, they have plenty of places to spend their money. And I think just remaining pro-business and smart with our regulatory environment and climate is going to be important as we navigate the near future. Moving on to innovation, legislation, regulation. These are lower right. You'll see North Dakota solidly in the number 3 spot as a third in oil production in the United States. Colorado and Alaska aren't even close at 3.7%. So just under 10% of the United States oil comes right out of the Williston Basin. And one thing that I think we all have to be mindful of is kind of the over legislation and over regulation. And these are 2 articles. I think they both came out probably in the last month. I would invite you to go take a look at them. But the top one is of course Governor Newsom from California, and this article really speaks about overregulation and climate policies have really challenged their economy. Lower left-hand corner is a state that I came from, and that's Colorado. And it's a recent article by Dan Haley, and it speaks to the idea that not too long ago, 10 to 15 years ago, Colorado was a top tier, top 5 state in the country for investment, for new investment, and that over that 10 to 15 years, how now they're near the bottom 5, and just lots of overregulation, in that state. So, as I continue up my learning curve at the state, I'm just going to be mindful of the balance between these 3 topics: innovation, legislation, and regulation. All right. Supply, demand, and the price of oil. I just kind of making a couple predictions. I think we're likely to have a period of lower oil and gas prices. Short term, I think they're going to be steady. Long term, we need to see more from what the Trump administration is going to do, but I don't believe the prices are going to go dramatically lower. I think the production will be flat, maybe slightly increasing, but again, this depends on mergers. Rig count should be relatively steady. Frac count should be relatively steady in the state. And then, really the idea of how does North Dakota leverage that investment landscape, and I'll just be mindful of that as I continue to work and learn here in the state. This was pretty interesting. So when Lynn cleaned his office out, he left this behind, and I thought it was really cool. Many of you have likely seen this, but this is the Bakken family. The Bakken well number 1. 3 miles northwest of Tioga, and I've just highlighted a couple things that I thought were really kind of cool. They started drilling this well July 13th, and they struck oil on September 5th. So for 1951, that really doesn't say. I know one time in my career I drilled a 90-day well, and it was with modern equipment. we had a tremendous amount of problems, but that seems pretty good for 1951. The sponsors are up there. I thought that was pretty neat, and just a real kind of neat flyer that was put together for this. And they had a free will offering and a dinner. So thought that was really neat. Some credits to the presentation, the EIA. Justin Kringstead, I work closely with. A gal by the name of Tricia Curtis runs a company called PetroNerds, and she's an economist. And I listen to her podcasts often. And then, of course, the great staff here at the Geologic Survey and the Oil and Gas Division have been incredibly helpful for me as I begin my journey here at the state with the DMR. And with that, that's the content that I had.
Well, I just want to thank you again so much for your time. I know you're very busy, but we appreciate all this information, and we thank you for joining us. Another huge thank you to the Williston API for sponsoring our first virtual seminar for 2025.